to edition 17 of All Killa No Filla podcast with me, Rachel Fairburn, and Kiri Pritchard McLean. Just before we start, we'll do our usual disclaimer. We're doing this podcast because we have a mutual interest in serial killers. It's something we find interesting. It's not hero worship. We both have strong father figures in our lives, not lacking in any areas in that way. And as long as we're doing this podcast, it stops us from writing to them in prison.
Episode 17, the Zodiac Killer. This one has taken us ages to do, hasn't it?
Yeah, there's so much.
Yeah, it seems not straightforward. Yeah,
it's very complicated.
So, those of you who aren't familiar with the Zodiac Killer, is an unknown serial killer. They never found who it was. So it was a spate of murderings around the sort of San Francisco and Lake Bellagio, is it? No, that's a hotel in Las Vegas. Lake something. You can see I've not really done my research on this one. So, and they were
in California.
California.
All around California.
Oh yeah, North California. Yeah. Zodiac Killer was never ever found, and they've got to a point now where they think that if that person, let's say man, let's call a
well, it's going to be
a spade, yeah. And that man is now dead.
There wasn't a scent of perfume at any of the murder scenes, so, I'm assuming.
Oh, he did a very good job of cleaning up. He claimed he killed 37, but we're going to talk through the confirmed victims of the serial killer, and then it's probably going to get a bit complicated. We sort of found some stuff out.
Yeah, I know we always say, this is a weird one before most of our podcasts, but this is
a fucking weird one.
A weird one, and there's so many things going on that,
from when we first met a few days ago and chatted through this, you were like, it's definitely this.
Yeah.
And then we went away and did some stuff and you were like, oh no, actually it's definitely this. And there's so much stuff I keep flip-flopping around with about, it'd be interesting to see what you think. You guys tweet us and let us know who and what you think the Zodiac was. And we'll tell you about some murders in the meantime.
Yeah. So the first one, and you're going to hate this because it's so near Christmas. December the 20th, 1968. David Faraday, who was 17, and Betty Lou Jensen, who was 16, were in a car, and they had headed out to a local Lover's Lane
makeout spot.
Yeah. I'd love to go to one of them.
Yeah, because we didn't have ones that we had like a bit. There was a guy that I knew when I was growing up, and he had a pit in his garden that he used to finger girls in, but there was no like makeout point.
We used ginnels quite often.
Oh, ginnels.
Yeah, I know they call different things all over. So a ginnel is like space between two houses up here in the north. So they called a ginnel here. Further up north, they called a snicket, and down south, I don't know what they're called.
They don't have them.
I think they're called land for building houses on. Down there. I'm not
they're
really
called
sure.
£500 per calendar, that's not including bills.
So yeah, we just use ginnels. But David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen had to drive out to. What annoys me is they've all got cars. I can't afford a car. Anyway, drove out to this local makeout spot.
When was this? Have we said the date?
Yeah, December the 20th night. So near Christmas, 1968. So they're in the car doing whatever they were doing, and by all accounts, a guy gets out of his car and they were shot. David Faraday was shot in the head, and Betty Lou Jensen was shot in the back 5 times as she was running away. This happened at 10:15. They were dead by 11 p.m. Betty Lou Jensen died at the scene, and David Faraday died in hospital. So police...
How did the guy who gets shot in the head hang on for a bit longer?
I don't know.
This is weird. This is there's a few cases of this that people get really badly injured and still live.
Yeah.
Something about the constitution. It's all that yoga in California.
I think it must be. It's got to be. So that happened, and obviously in the area that it wasn't a violent area. It was quite a quiet town.
Yeah, and they were two like grade A students,
yeah.
weren't they? And they were just like cute little like, maybe we could hold hands tonight or whatever. I don't know what base anything is in America.
Yeah, I think they might have been going up to second base.
What is second base?
I would say...
Is it tops?
Kissing with tops off. Or light fingering.
Light fingering?
Yeah. So,
oh, God.
like tentative fingering, I would say. With permission.
That sounds
and
like
not in the heat of the moment.
That sounds like a light fingering or tentative fingering sounds like an exercise your guitar teacher gives you. So I want you to work on that for next week.
And then you will know smoke on the water. Sadly, may I say, they both died. The place where this happened, everyone was like, oh, this is terrible. Nothing like this ever happens here. What is going on?
It's nearly Christmas.
It's nearly Christmas. There was no leads. There was nothing.
There was no real evidence, because at the time this is pre-forensics.
Yeah.
So they had bullet casing, but they were just like, why is it? It seemed completely unprovoked, because these two kids were just like lovely, nice kids. So everyone's like, how and why has this suddenly happened, that someone has just got out and what seemingly randomly executed two nice young people?
Then, obviously, as time goes on, people might have forgotten about these murders and thought, well, that was a one-off. But then, on the 4th of July 1969, another important date, not near Christmas, but a holiday for the people of America.
Oh, yeah.
7 months after the first murder, this was at Blue Rock Springs. Mike McGough, who's 19, and Darlene Ferrin had driven out to, again, a make-out spot. But apparently they weren't together, whether they were just pals.
They were just pals, but she was a bit of a goer, apparently.
Yeah. I used to have a lot of pals that I used to just chat with when I wanted to get off with them when I was younger. So,
oh, really?
Yeah. Hey, let's be friends. Hey.
Oh, let them confide in you about how much they loved another girl.
Yeah.
That was my reality. Yeah, she is great, yeah. Yeah, she is pretty. Fucking hell.
And then you're just like, well, I heard she did this. And they'd be like, oh my God, I hate her.
Yeah, and when he was like, she did this, like, you really go on, oh my God, what a bitch. You should never speak to her again. It's weird, isn't it? Because sometimes you just fall in love to the person who's right in front of you. No, it doesn't matter. I didn't say anything. Get off me.
Is that her ringing now? Don't answer it. So, Mike McGough and Darlene Ferrin, they were shot. He came back. The killer got out of the car. Now, Mike McGough survived this attack. He was shot in the face, neck and chest. And Darlene Ferrin died. Mike McGough said a chap pulled up in a car, shot them, but he came back and shot them again just to make sure that they were dead.
Well, what happens? Wasn't it the one where basically a car pulled up behind the car and shone its headlights?
Yeah.
And she was meant to have said something. Darlene was meant to have said, "Oh, it's him." And then the car drove off, and they think the same car, but they don't know. Then pulled up alongside them, shone a torch in their face because they thought it was the police, and then just started firing at them. Shot Mike, shot Darlene, and loads of the bullets apparently went through Darlene into Mike, which is maybe one of the reasons why he didn't die, because there wasn't as much impact. And then what happened was Mike was sort of groaning in the car. He thought he'd killed them. Mike was groaning, and he came back and he fired 2 more shots into them. And Mike still lived. Like, if we're going to find the cure for AIDS, it's in Mike.
Yeah,
he's indestructible. Maybe it was because they actually found there's loads of weird little stuff here. He was wearing loads of layers of clothes, Mike, the guy who was shot. Like, he had, 2 pairs of pants on, 3 pairs of jeans, loads of jumpers and things.
And this is California in July, so it's not
California,
cold.
yeah. And he says it's because it was skinny and he wanted to be bulked out. But there are theories that he was a burglar. And he would sort of jump in and out of houses and then just change his clothes, throw some clothes away, and then, because you'd be looking for a guy in a blue jumper and black jeans, and then all of a sudden there's a guy in red chinos and a yellow t-shirt, and you're like, well, it can't be him. And so there was rumours about that. But yeah, so maybe the fact he didn't die is because he's wearing so many layers. It's like his own personal bulletproof
his own armour.
vest.
Yeah. Then, when this happens, about an hour later, there was a phone call made to the local police station. And in the phone call, a man, obviously, phoned up and said that he had done those murders, that he'd done the previous murders of Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday. And he had a very controlled voice. The person who took the call said he had a very controlled voice, very calm, as if he was reading off something. And then at the end he said, "Goodbye."
Oh my God, it was Anne Robinson.
Yeah. Goodbye. So, now obviously this came in after the murders, which I think is quite an hour after.
Yeah, he said, I killed those guys and I killed the ones at Lake, whatever it was, earlier. So he claimed responsibility for the 2 lots of murders. When they traced the call, it was found that it was coming right by the police station.
It was
so
he would have 2 blocks from the police station.
He would have been in eye shot of the police station when he called, woman called Nancy answered it. And if you sift around the darker corners of the internet, which I have done, there's a forum about the Zodiac Killer, and there is a guy on there who tracked her down and spoke to her and asked loads of questions and has run past loads of... got voice samples from some of the suspects of the Zodiac and played them to her. She's like, no, it's not them. And she's like, can't describe the voice. I would just definitely know if I heard it again. And apparently it was sort of... his voice was really calm, like he was reading something and sort of measured until the end where he was like, goodbye. And like really sold it. So
it's a bit like it sounds a bit like when you're dying on your ass on stage, like you're dead cat and you're doing your stuff, and at the end you're like, oh, just bye, whatever.
Yeah, well, this has been a gig, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And then storm off.
Thanks for listening.
This is where it all starts to get confusing again. The letters begin.
Yes.
So on August the 1st, it was 1969, 3 sort of nearly identical letters were sent to different newspapers, to the Vallejo Times-Herald, San Francisco Chronicle, and the San Francisco Examiner. And they had a cryptogram in them. And he said, basically sort of like, well, you know what a cryptogram is. And he said, I'd tell you who I am in this if you can crack it. And he said that he wanted to be on the front page of every newspaper, so he's one of those assholes. Or else he would... Oh, his spelling as well. I think we're looking for a dyslexic.
I think we are.
He would cruise around all weekend, killing lone people in the night, then move on to kill again until I end up with a dozen people over the weekend.
I'll be honest, look for a man with a lot of free time at the weekend. That's what they should be looking for.
Look for a man who's had his kids taken away. Yeah. Doesn't even get them anymore.
Look for weekend dad, but every other weekend.
So they did print it, but they didn't put it on the front page. And lo and behold, he didn't cruise around all weekend killing lone people. But it had this cryptogram in it, and the police couldn't decode it. But they put a bit of it in the paper, and they were like, "Can any of you do it?" Like you get the puzzle pages next to the Sudoku was a code from a murderer.
It was actually solved by a couple. I think they were retired or they were still school teachers. Donald and Betty Harden. They cracked the code.
I love it that we were chatting about this earlier. It's just 2 teachers are like, oh, should we ever go with this, love? And they just crack this code, and it is difficult because the spelling is fucking atrocious in this letter. I mean, it's shifting sands that you're trying to deal with. But they did 2 really clever things. They looked at the case and they went, right, okay, this is a really selfish man. So he'll say I a lot because he is his own world. So they knew that it was likely to start with an I. So then they got that vowel, and then they said he'll mention kill or killing a lot. So we're looking for double letters. So there was lots of double L's in it. And then they kind of went from there, which is so clever, isn't it? Whereas the police were like, this is hard.
We ain't got time.
Can I just do the one where you find your way through a maze instead?
A lot of double L's in the letter. It's a good job it wasn't a Welsh. Yeah, so they do this, which is fantastic. Good for them. It took them all weekend as well, I think.
Oh, did it?
Yeah, it took them a good couple of days.
Imagine that, though. Imagine you and your partner did something like that. Like, what do you do for the next thrill?
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean?
Well, you go out and kill.
Yeah. Yeah. Should we try anal? Like... So it said, I like killing people because it's so much fun. It's more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all to kill. Something gives me the most thrilling experience. It is even better than getting your rocks off with a girl, he imagines. The best part of it is that when I die, I will be reborn in paradise, and then they have killed will become my slaves. I will not give you my name because you will try to slow down or stop my collecting of slaves for my afterlife. And then there's just loads of weird letters.
Well, one is talking rubbish.
The spelling is so bad.
Spelling's terrible. And the police chief, Jack Schiltz,
yeah,
wasn't satisfied that it was the killer that had written this.
No.
And he requested more information.
Yeah.
In a letter.
Yeah, on August 7th, so the next day, they got another letter to the San Francisco Examiner, and it started it off with, Dear Editor, this is the Zodiac speaking. So this is the first time that he named himself, like they all fucking do. Like
he's
BTK.
Branding himself,
he really is. He's gone for a strong brand. So basically, it was in response to the fact that Stiltz had said, "I don't think you're the killer. So you better send me some more information on the murders, and then we can confirm it." So he did include details about the murders which hadn't been released to the public yet, allegedly, as well as a message to the police that that if they cracked his code, that they would have him. But we'll talk about that later. It's a bit complicated.
He made several threats in his letters of things he was going to do.
Yeah.
But none of these things came to fruition.
Well, he said he would go around, if he didn't print it on the front page, he'll go around shooting people. That didn't happen.
If you don't print my letter, I'm going to kill everybody. I might take this approach with gigs, in emails. See what happens.
There's someone who does that, isn't there? It says, book me for your gig, and if I don't rip it, you don't have to pay me.
Oh, I think I know who that is.
Yeah.
I hope he doesn't listen to this.
I doubt it.
He won't
He's
listen to this.
He's too fucking mad. He's out doing his own murders.
If you want to know who it is, just DM us.
Am I going to end up cutting all this?
Yeah, probably.
He kept communicating over the years, but I'll try and do it in chronological order because it's quite complicated. Because I think it was a bit like Jack the Ripper in that everyone was having a go at these letters.
It has the feel of BTK, and it has the feel of the guy who sent the letters to the Ripper inquiry in Leeds. It has the feel, I think, of not quite true.
Okay, so the next murders...
Number 3.
Number
Napa.
3. Yeah.
This is in Napa, the 27th of September 1969. Whenever I say dates like 27th of September 1969, in the back of my head, like, the Beatles play.
Oh,
and
really?
I see people, like, go dancing.
So you've got
and
a BBC 4 documentary
I have,
in your
yes.
head?
It's very weird. This next... Well, one murder and a survival. Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepherd were having a picnic on a small island in Napa, and they're enjoying themselves and, having maybe a glass of champagne. I don't know. And Cecilia says to Brian, "Who is that man and why is he watching us?"
Oh.
So this man sort of keeps appearing, and then he comes out from... He's got a gun. He comes out. He's also got an outfit on, a special outfit. He's wearing a black executioner type hood, a bib vest with the Zodiac symbol on it, which he'd obviously developed, which was a circle with a cross through it, which looks a bit like, I imagine, a sight from a gun when you look through a gun.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, you're
target.
Right.
So he came out dressed like this with, and I shouldn't find this amusing because this is terrible what happens, with his glasses through the...
Oh yeah, he's got clip-on glasses.
He's got like a
top.
slit for the eyes, like postbox shape for the eyes, and his glasses over the top.
Got to be practical, Rachel.
So he comes out and he approaches them. He ties them both up because he's got the gun. You're going to be submissive out there. He stabs Cecilia, who dies, and he stabs Brian, and Brian lived. Brian, by all accounts, said, "Well, if you're going to kill us, can you kill me first? Because I can't bear to watch Cecilia be in pain." Which is quite sweet, really.
Yeah, it is. You can tell it's still the 60s, can't you? That wouldn't happen now.
No, it wouldn't.
You wanted equality, you get to
do
die
it
first.
second. Brian lives, sadly Cecilia dies. There's a fisherman out on the lake, and he hears something going on, and he's like, "That doesn't sound like cod." And he goes to the phone box and makes a phone call to the police, informs the sheriff office that something's kicking off. At 7:40, I think it was, this phone call came in. So they go out to the location and they find carnage, and Brian survives. There's also a lot of weird stuff that happens around this because there is some evidence, because the killer has left a bloody palm print on Brian's car and also written dates of other murders that he'd done.
Yeah, so he wrote down the other Zodiac killings in a date and would put, like, by gun next to it. So he put the date of the first 2 kids on the date, and then he put the date of the Mike McGough and Darlene Ferris by gun. And then he wrote September 27th, 69, 6:30 by knife, and then scrawled the Zodiac symbol into the car door, which is fucking weird.
So by this point, they're looking for a man with glasses with access to a pen. So there's still not much to go on about.
And then at 7:40, the Napa police received a call from a telephone box that was only a few blocks away from the murder. Well, no, in fact, from the police department. And then the officer said he listened, and the caller again, in a very low monotone voice, said, "I want to report a murder." "No, a double murder. They are 2 miles north of park headquarters. They're in a white Volkswagen Commander Gia," whatever that is. The police officer asked him to provide a location, and the voice grew more distant, and the caller replied, I'm the one who did it, which is totally badass.
He knows the power of a pause, doesn't he?
Oh, he really does, yeah. It's like Pinter.
I was starting to think he's a drama student now. What with the dramatic letters and the
What's
pauses.
my motivation? Yeah. Getting away with it.
And the costumes.
It's all a bit Amdram, this, isn't it?
It's all a bit Amdram. So this, again, they've not really got anything to go off, because although they've got the palm print, it doesn't match. They've got no one to match it to.
Yeah, and it's not like they have a huge database. It's not like CSI where they can just flick through it. They have to, someone will have to physically look at it, and obviously fingerprints are far more accurate. Yeah. When the Zodiac came over to them in this hood and these clip-on glasses like Roy Cropper, he said to them that he was an escaped convict, where he'd killed a guard and stolen a car, and that he needed their car and money to go to Mexico. And he'd brought with him lengths of sort of like pre-cut washing line. He told the girl to tie the guy up, and then he tied her up. And then he tightened up the boys' bonds, because the girl had deliberately done it loose so he could wriggle free. And then they just thought it was a robbery that was a bit weird. And then he just pulled this knife out and started stabbing them. Must have been already it's terrifying, but then you're like, it's cool, if we just cooperate, everything's going to be fine.
The next murder, October 11th, 1969. Paul Stein, taxi driver. This was in Presidio Heights in San Francisco. A man gets into his cab and asks him to take him to kind of Washington and Maple Street, which is actually, how do we know this? Because the taxi driver's dead.
Yeah, that is
so
weird,
how do we know that this is where he has to go to? Because when the police got to the scene, Paul Stein was dead. So how do they know that he has to go to kind of Washington and Maple Street?
I don't know, is it like, the taxi driver's key in a thing? But it's the 60s, isn't it?
60s, yeah. And apparently Stein...
shouted out the window?
Yeah, just so you know. Stein drove one block over past Maple Street to Cherry Street, and this is where he was shot once with a 9mm pistol. Wallet and car keys were taken, and a bit of his shirt was cut off, which we'll come to in a bit. But this is the bit that confuses me, because there wasn't a letter, and I don't think this was mentioned in the letter, so how do they know that that's where he was going to?
Fuck knows.
So that's weird.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? This Zodiac pulls off a bit of his shirt and wipes down the car of his fingerprints, which hasn't been done before, but there was still found a fingerprint in blood on the car. Mm-hmm. During this, 3 teenagers are in a house across the road and see it happening.
What would they do with the teenagers? And it's the 60s. They should be out.
Yeah, that is weird.
Just sitting in your house.
Also,
anyway.
why aren't you in school?
Yeah.
So they phoned the police and were like, there's a crime happening right now, and described the guy and go, he's walking this way. Now, on the way there, the police passed someone fitting the description of a white guy of whatever with brown hair. But they have decided in their infinite wisdom, it's probably a black guy.
Yeah. So it's a black guy who's whited up.
Yeah, exactly.
That is
Well, the kids go, there's a white guy with brown hair, and they go, that
no,
probably
it's
mean
a
black.
brown guy with white hair. This can't be right.
It's Dennis Rodman.
Mixed up. Yeah.
So they just ignore this guy and they pass him by. They claim they didn't stop and speak to him, but they just ignored this guy who passed on the way because he apparently appeared to be in no hurry. I'll read you the police statement in a minute. But they just sort of let this guy go and then got to the scene, and there was nothing. A lot of the evidence had been sort of wiped away apart from this one fingerprint. Now then, he wrote a letter, the Zodiac, and said, you stopped me and let me get away. And the police denied it. And they went, oh, but now you say it, there was one guy.
There was that guy.
And it's amazing what they've said about him. They said, well, the subject at the time appeared to be in no hurry, and he had a shuffling lope, slightly bent forward. And then they said, I say his general appearance was Welsh. I don't know when that has been a thing.
It was Welsh ancestry, wasn't
it? Welsh ancestry.
I'm keen to know what this means.
I think he was riding down the street on a sheep.
Carrying a rugby ball.
With a leek between his teeth. And they're like, I'm just getting a vibe that this guy might have Welsh ancestry.
He's off to do some Welsh guy stuff. He can't be the murderer.
The Zodiac said, you stopped me, and that was never released anywhere. And the police were like, no, we didn't. And then these 2 policemen came forward and went, actually, we did stop someone.
We did stop someone. And didn't that person that they stopped say, oh, I just saw a man run into the park?
Yes, he sort of like double bluffed them and went, they were like, have you seen anything suspicious? And he went, well, I've seen a black guy around here. And they're like, which way did he go?
He went that way.
And with him, the civil rights movement. So yeah, on October 14th, 1969, the Chronicle received a letter from the Zodiac. No one really knows about the validity of these letters, but this one had a piece of Paul Stein's shirt in it with blood on it. So that's fairly good proof. Whoever sent that in was also the killer of Paul Stein. Now then, he put a threat in here which really shit everyone up. He said that he was going to kill a load of school kids. Yeah. So he said, I'm just going to shoot out the front tyre and then pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out.
I shouldn't laugh, but it
sounds adorable.
I keep imagining it like a cartoon thing going on in my head. A bit Looney Tunes. He also drew pictures of bombs that the police said, yes, they would work.
Yeah, they did. Fertiliser bombs he was making.
They would work. But I suppose, I'm not even going to go into how we would make a bomb in this current climate. I'm not going to say anything. I'm done. I know nothing about bombs or anything.
But they took him so seriously that for a while, the school buses had helicopters escorting them and armed police on them. Just let the kids have a go on a helicopter, for fuck's sakes. They might be dead next week. So they really did sort of take it seriously.
This was in the same letter. The alleged Zodiac wanted people to start wearing badges with his symbol, his circle with the cross through it. Because he said, people are always wearing like Black Power ones and ban the bomb. I'd like to see people wearing Zodiac badges.
That is the most arrogant thing I've ever heard. There's also a weird thing happened with this letter. So there was a call. So on October the 20th, 1969, someone claiming to be the Zodiac called the Oakland Police Department, and he said that he wanted two of these really high-profile celebrity lawyers to go on a local TV show called AM San Francisco, so like their GMTV. The first guy wasn't available, so this guy called Melvin Belly appeared on the show.
He sounds like a character from the Fast Show.
He does, yeah. Or the Beano. Melvin Belly's on his way. Or Viz. They said to the viewers, please don't phone in, just let this Zodiac phone in. And then someone called up several times and said that his name was Sam, and they sort of agreed to meet with this lawyer, but the suspect never showed up. Now, it gets really, really weird here.
I imagine being stood up by a murderer. It's horrible, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the worst. It's really, really weird, because the police then traced the calls, and they came from this famous solicitor's house. And they identified the person who said they were the Zodiac as a guy from a mental hospital who sort of escaped. And it's just really weird. And it's known as the Belize birthday call, because at one point the Zodiac says, today's my birthday. Like, surely they must have known that, like, oh, all right, just stick to the subject. How did you kill them? So it's sort of like, it's so weird. There's so much stuff.
Well, happy birthday.
Yeah. Okay, well, did you get anything nice, or... How old are you? Should have at least found that out. The Zodiac was worried that this crazy person calling him would undermine him as a thing, so they think that he sent another letter to this solicitor to prove that he was real. So he sent a letter to this Belly guy with another piece of this blood-soaked shirt in it to prove that he was the real Zodiac. It was really weird, because the solicitor as well was going, I will represent the Zodiac in court. And they were going, you can't represent someone that you don't know exists. And he was like, I'll represent them, and if you want to get in contact with me, do it through the newspapers. So it was really weird. I think it was a publicity stunt.
Yeah. It's all very strange. I know we say this all the time about this, but this one is just like...
It's really odd.
It's so
like everyone's trying to make £1 million off
it.
Yeah, that happened. And then a little bit later, on November the 8th, 1969, the Zodiac posted a card with another cryptogram on it, and it's never been decoded. There's loads of suggestions of solutions, but none of them have been sort of signed off.
Maybe it doesn't mean anything. I mean, alright, the first one was crap. A code like that, without any definite, yes, that's correct, it's a bit like, you can technically write anything. I just don't... I mean, maybe it was just a series of symbols and letters.
Well, you're saying he would have done one to just throw them off the tracks?
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're fucking mental, aren't they? They, like, BTK, like, did give himself away a lot in them. They can't help themselves. That's part of the problem, isn't it?
That's true.
But I think it was like Jack the Ripper, and that loads of people were up to it. And then, November the 9th, 1969, the Zodiac sent a 7-page letter. Who writes letters that long?
What year? What month was that?
That was November the 9th. Maybe he's doing the Christmas round robin. I was going to say
the pre-Christmas round robin, what he's been up to.
Rose did very well in her GCSEs. and is off to Oxford. And that is a direct quote from someone who knows. In that letter, he says, 2 policemen stopped me and spoke to me 3 minutes after I shot that guy. And then that's when that all came out. Bits of the letter were published in the Chronicle, including the stuff about the police officers. And that's when they came forward and were like, oh yeah, maybe we did stop and speak to someone, but you look Welsh. How could we have known? Yeah, so there's all these bits of shirt, right, flying around. All these phone calls, all these letters. It's very confusing. It doesn't seem to be that any of them are sent by the same person.
And then it goes quiet. Between 1971, there was no letters till 1974, which is when the person writing these letters takes it upon themselves to do a couple of film reviews.
Yeah, although we should include Kathleen Johns.
Oh, yes, of course. That was before... Oh, yeah.
That was 1970, wasn't it?
This is an incident...
This is weird, this.
...that the Zodiac was linked to. Kathleen Johns was driving along the road. She was pregnant. She had a small baby in the car. She's flashed by a car behind her, so she thinks, oh, I'll just pull over. She pulls over, and the chap gets out of the car and says, oh, you've something's wrong with your tyre. I'll sort that out for you. And she's like, all right, okay. So he goes to sort it out, and she's like, thank you, bye-bye. And as she goes to drive off, the wheel comes off. And he's like, oh, I'll give you a ride. I'll give you a lift. It's fine. So she gets in the car with him, and as soon as she gets in the car, it's evident she's made a mistake because he starts saying, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill your baby. I'm going to throw your baby out of the car. Like, taunting her and just being generally horrible. He then... Does he take a wrong turn, or he has to slow down or something?
Slow down.
And she then jumps out of the car and rolls into a field.
With the baby.
And he drives off because apparently he was scared by a passing truck driver. Usually people are scared by the truck drivers. But in this occasion, he did a good job. She then goes to the police station, and there's a Zodiac poster on the wall with a sort of a photo fit of what they think he looks like, and she identifies Zodiac.
She goes, that is the man I got in the car with.
As the man from the car. Now, this is more or less an hour or so afterwards, I imagine.
So this was the person who, rather than the Zodiac, it is the person who shot Paul Stein that the kids described, that she says that is the person who got in the car. But she was genuinely frightened. She thought that he was going to come back and kill her because they basically went and put her in a restaurant in the dark and went, wait in there. Oh, that's not fucking terrifying, is it? Going to a restaurant and sitting in the dark on your own. And then they found her car and it'd been completely gutted and torched. And they think that was a way of getting rid of the fingerprints.
So that was the last incident, really, to be linked to the so-called Zodiac. Although in letters he had claimed he killed 37. Well, I love it because in one of the letters he says, you don't know how many I killed. And then another letter he says, 37.
Yeah. He also did a thing where he puts like the Zodiac symbol and then equals 10. And then SFPD, which is San Francisco Police Department, equals 0.
10-0.
Exactly. So he is writing little bits and weird stuff to them all the time, and ciphers and cryptograms, and he's spending a fortune in stamps.
Yeah, he's very productive. So the 1974 letter, when it's been quiet for a good few years, he mentions that he's been to see The Exorcist, and he calls this the best satirical comedy he's ever seen.
Yeah,
so he's trying to be funny.
Yeah, spells comedy with an I.
By this point, again, the police thinking, well, the suspect is someone who's been to a cinema, which is really narrowing it down. And then there's a Mikado quote, isn't there?
So weird. He starts quoting musicals. He starts quoting like lines from the Mikado and stuff. It's very bizarre. So he says weird stuff he says in them. In one letter, which was just really long and rambling, and sort of had descriptions of torture and stuff in it, and select passages from Gilbert and Sullivan musical The Mikado. He also says, hey, Blue Pig, doesn't it rile you to have your nose rubbed in your boo-boos? I don't even know what that means. I don't know what a boo-boo is.
I don't either.
I think it was what one of those kids was touching as they were shot in the car.
Does it mean, like, shit?
I don't know. Because a boo-boo is like when someone hurts themselves, isn't it? Like, you know, when you graze your knee, and you're like, if you've got a boo-boo, but I don't fuck knows what...
I don't even think he knows what he's on about. And
he also referred to the police as the blue meanies at one point. But he had this whole thing of, like, taunting them, and he really loved the fact that they couldn't find out who he was. But then these letters, as you say, stopped in 71, started again in 74, reviewing The Exorcist. He was just sort of reinventing himself as a social commenter. He was like, there was no Mark Commode. So he said another thing as well. He said that this really violent film that came out at the time was in very bad taste. But they were like, well, that's his sense of humour, is to be a shit like that. So, but it sounded like the letters were just fucking never really stopping, and just loads of bullshit being sent in.
It claimed in one of the letters that he would either commit suicide or reinvent himself, didn't it?
Yeah.
I often feel like that with my career.
I wish Madonna would do.
Yeah.
Do the latter.
Murder-wise and everything, that was pretty much... They're the only murders that were...
You can definitely link to him.
Yeah.
There was other things that happened at the time, because he kept saying, like, in some of the letters he said... I'm going to shoot a guy parked in his car, he said in one. And then he said, also, I hope you enjoy yourselves when I have my blast, in capital letters. Oh, it's so clumsy. Yeah, he said he was going to, that I shot a man sitting in a parked car with a 38. Now, there had been a murder then, but, I mean, in America, being shot with a gun in a car is not that unusual a thing. So there was all sorts of kind of claims, and he always claimed that he killed 37, but the ones that we've been through are really ones that we can go, okay, those are attributed to him. Just like with Jack the Ripper, it's 5, 7 or 11 victims, depending on how you look at it.
So this is where, again, things become strange. There's so many theories and accusations flying around about Zodiac. I believed 100% that he was a serial killer, and I was like, definitely. Now, the more I've looked into it, the more I've read about it, I'm starting to doubt that, and I'm actually starting to think, because I initially thought, I think this is someone who was a policeman who was involved.
Yeah, you thought it was a policeman, didn't you?
That's what I thought.
Now, I listened to a great podcast that we recommend. If you go, it's called Generation Y, spelled W-H-Y. And if you look at the Zodiac ones, there's a guy on there, I can't remember his name, I should remember, I'm really sorry. And he's sort of blown it wide open for me, because he, obsessive to the point of it being a worry, but he's been through all the police files and all the evidence. Now, what happened was in 1978, this guy called Robert Graysmith sort of appears, and he publishes a book about the Zodiac. Now, he worked at the newspaper at the time, and he is, if you've seen the film Zodiac with Jake Gyllenhaal, he is the main guy in that, and he's sort of meant to be the foremost expert on the Zodiac. And he was the one who came forward with loads of theories. He was about to publish the book, and sort of, it's weird, because it's like a fictionalised factual account.
But passed off as fact.
Passed off as fact. Yeah. He doesn't use people's names, but he goes, I think it was this person with a changed name. And then when the book came out and everyone was like, you've solved the case, and then he was like, who do you mean? And he named Arthur Lee Allen as the murderer.
Arthur Lee Allen, bit of a loner.
That's not the worst thing about him, though, is it?
No, it's not. Kept himself to himself. Very quiet man. Had friends, but he apparently had a very, very high IQ, near genius. Now, it was near genius level IQ, but that IQ didn't inform him not to touch kids because he was a paedophile. Robert Graysmith really went to town on this guy. He says the murder the stabbing, where Cecilia died, he said that Arthur Lee Allen, who was a keen hunter and fisherman, he was at the island where this happened because apparently he told one of his friends, oh, that's where I'm going to go to today. I'm going to do a bit of fishing. When he came back, it was reported after, all of these murders, that Arthur Lee Allen was covered in blood and had a knife that was covered in blood. And when he was asked about this, he said, oh, actually, I went to the coast instead. I wasn't at that island. I'd been helping a family who were having a barbecue, and I'd cut their chicken up for them. And that's why he was covered in blood, with a knife covered in blood, which doesn't
add up to me.
Doesn't add up.
No, I think there's something dodgy there.
But then again, this is after the event, and this is somebody saying it after the event.
Years, like nearly a decade
after the event. So it's very unreliable.
Yeah, and so basically Arthur Lee Allen was, I think, framed based on circumstantial evidence. And the circumstantial evidence was that he was a bit of a weird one, and obviously he was a paedophile, which is horrendous. He had loads of bits of animals in his home, but he was a hunter, so he was going to have bits of stuff around.
I mean, if we're going to start incriminating people for having bits of animals in the house, I think me and you...
Yeah, Rachel and I are top of the list.
Yeah, we go to prison forever.
He also had a Zodiac watch that his mum had got him and his brother, like the the Zodiac. And this happened a year before the first murders. He got this watch. That was sort of it. That was sort of why he was accused of it. But Robert Graysmith, when he released this book, he changed the... So basically, if you look at those Zodiac things, this is why I don't think there was a Zodiac serial killer. all the MOs are different.
Yeah.
All the victims are different. So he kills them in different ways. He doesn't kill the same type of person. That's very unusual for a serial killer. It doesn't seem that apart from the shirt, any trophies were taken, which is very unusual for a serial killer. Also, none of the fingerprints match. None of the descriptions given by survivors or witnesses match. One of them sort of matches Arthur Lee Allen, but in his book, Robert Graysmith changes the descriptions that people gave, including the really reliable one from 3 teenagers, to make it sound like it looked like Arthur Lee Allen when it didn't, because we know he's a black guy.
Yeah.
Not really, but like, you know, it didn't look anything like him. It was meant to be someone who was sort of like tall and with dark hair, and Arthur Lee Allen was like short with blonde hair. I just think that this poor guy, although he's a paedophile and that's horrendous, he was set up. He was totally set up.
The period of when the letters stop from 71 to 74, he was actually in prison during those years. But I think if you're going to set somebody up for something stopping when somebody's in prison.
Now, they say they have a witness. It was that this guy called Ralph Spinelli contacted the Villaggio Police Department, and he said, I'll give you information on the Zodiac Killer if you stop me from going to prison for 30 years. And he said that I will testify that Arthur Lee Allen had said that he was going to be the Zodiac and that he was going to kill a cab driver in San Francisco. Spinelli and Arthur Lee Allen had a history. They used to fight each other all the time. There was a fist fight between the two of them that ended up in their arrest. And they believed this criminal who needed to get off a 30-year sentence and used that as a reason to sort of sniff around and hound Arthur Lee Allen. And he was hounded, especially after that book came out, because it came out that the police had bought loads of copies of that book and were using it as a factual reference for the case. And in which case they went round to Arthur Lee Allen's... also, he had a typewriter that was similar to the one that the Zodiac was using, but loads of fucking people did. And it was a really common type of typewriter. So they went round to his house and searched it and asked him questions. And Arthur Lee Allen said, it wasn't me. That's the truth. And if people want to believe me, well, that's their problem. I was cleared on every angle, including the handwriting test. Plus, I don't look anything like the guy. So he was just, and this is at the end of his life as well. So he went to his grave, and when he died, it was sort of released everywhere that this is the guy that we think was the Zodiac Killer. So he went to his grave a guilty man.
They kept a part of some of his DNA back to test as well. Mm-hmm. And later on, when things had progressed, none of his DNA matched anything.
No, and then they turned around and went, well, maybe it's because the DNA's old, and it's like, oh, it's just not that guy.
Oh, it's not him. It's clearly not him. And I don't ever want to be in a position where I'm sticking up for a paedophile, right? And this is the position I've been put in today. Yes, he's a paedophile, and that's dreadful.
I don't think we're going to get it on T-shirts or anything.
No, but he wasn't a murderer.
Nope.
I don't think he did any of this.
I don't think... Well, he did say, I've done some very bad things, but I didn't do this. This is sort of what's come out. I really recommend listening to that other podcast. I know we shouldn't do that, technically.
It is very good.
It is very good.
I found it very, very interesting, and it was so relaxing the way they were speaking, I actually nodded off. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. It was very, very good. Excellent podcast. So
the more you look into Robert Graysmith, the creepier he gets. He worked at the newspaper at the time that these letters are being sent in. His job was to take photographs of the newspaper, the letters when they arrived. Now, these letters from the Zodiac would only ever arrive when he was working, which I think is a bit of a coincidence.
It's a bit like when money goes missing from the till on certain people's
shift.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Oh, another tenner's gone.
There is rumours that his handwriting did have signs of the Zodiac's handwriting as well, because Arthur Lee Allen's handwriting didn't match, but Robert Graysmith did match it. So I don't think he's a murderer, but I think he wanted the glory, or wants the glory, possibly, allegedly, please don't sue us, of finding a killer and bringing him to justice. He's released 2 books that have made him a millionaire. He is the foremost authority on the Zodiac Killer. But if it's really sketchy and really inaccurate, loads of the things that he's sort of implying. And that's really dangerous, because what I was saying to Rachel is that means that because this is why I flip-flop. Now, whenever you say there's a serial killer, the public goes fucking crazy. Mm-hmm. But what is scarier? One man that they haven't found, or loads of different people murdering for what seems to be no reason.
Yeah.
which is scarier, isn't it? Because that's going to be a big climate of like, you could be anyone. You could be a girl walking home on your own. You could be in a couple. You could be at the daytime at a lake. Yeah. Someone's going to get you. And also at this time in this area, loads of meth had sort of flooded the area, and there was loads of violent crimes. Where Paul Stein was killed, the taxi driver, there'd been a load of violent robberies in that area. So if you put it into the wider context, it looks like a load of murders that had been sort of drawn together from bullshit. Yeah. Because also, Robert Graysmith went, oh yeah, no. It actually relates to an astrological pattern. Like, there's enough stars that you can bullshit anything.
Yeah, you can pretty much... Everything's an astrological pattern.
Yeah, because look at the zodiac signs. You're like, that's meant to be a man with a bow and arrow. Fuck off. Oh, that's a bear, is it? Right, yeah, brilliant.
There's so much going on and there's so much to question. I mean, one of the things that sticks out to me is it's like, did the Zodiac thing encourage a copycat as well in New York?
Yeah, there's copycats. Also, people every now and then would sort of like stir up the case. So there was another letter in 1978 that at first everyone was like, oh my god, it's the Zodiac again, it's the Zodiac again. But 3 months later they're like, it's a hoax. Because this guy called Dave Toschi, who was a homicide detective at San Francisco PD, there was a letter that was sent going, it's the Zodiac Killer, and he named this inspector, this Dave guy. He said something Dave Toschi in it. And then there was loads of sort of publicity around it. And then they found it matched a fan letter that he had sent, written by himself.
Oh.
Yeah, it's so embarrassing.
Dave.
Like a few years earlier, I think it was in 1976.
Oh, no.
Yeah, he was sending himself fan mail being like, I think Dave's doing a really good job and probably should get a pay rise, actually. And then he writes to himself as a serial killer.
Oh, please,
Come on, Dave.
That would be really sad if he wasn't in such an important job.
Yeah, that's true.
Very sad.
So there's been copycats since. There's been one, and loads of people coming out going, it's like, I'm Spartacus. Loads of people going, my stepdad was the Zodiac Killer. It's always a stepdad as well, the poor bastards. So in 2007, someone called Dennis Kaufman said that his stepdad, Jack Terrence, was the Zodiac. Again, it turned out to be bullshit. There was meant to be photographs of the crimes, but they were very small, had a low resolution, so they couldn't really tell. So that was sort of deemed sort of inconclusive. The handwriting samples are inconclusive. 2009, there was said that there was a guy who confessed to being the Zodiac Killer in 1972 to him, and that he only just was able to release it. In 2009, that they thought that it might have been a newspaper editor who was doing it to sell papers. So it was like a national hobby for a while.
You know, I think if I was dying when I get older, I think I would definitely just admit to loads of murders on my deathbed. I think it would be... I'd just be like, oh yeah, I did all those murders. That was me. Because I think police would be like, oh, we're going to have to clear this woman's house. And if I had any kids, they wouldn't have the distress of a house clearance, or we wouldn't have to pay for it. So I think that's quite a good...
Are you going to go through your books and underline random words?
Yeah, underline random words.
Make up a cryptogram in the back of it.
Just have a box of like glasses and stuff.
They'll probably give you... Don't they give you like a state burial as well? Not a state burial.
A state burial?
That's what that
just got, wait till the Yorkshire Ripper dies.
We'll have a day off work.
Yeah.
No, I feel they have to pay for your funeral or something if they do, like, if they fuck around with you.
Do you know, I've always said this, that all these adverts on TV that basically Michael Parkinson bursts into your living room and tells you you're going to die. Don't listen to him, because if you die, they have to get rid of your body. Environmental health have to pay for your cremation. You won't have a do or anything. They'll just take the body and cremate you free. You can't leave dead bodies lying around in houses because it's a health hazard.
No, so but also you don't want to be tied up in a bin bag, do you? Or put in a recycling.
Yeah, but I'm not bothered.
I suppose.
So just let that be a tip to you. But other than that, back to Zodiac.
But you don't get a free pen if you do that. That's the other thing to bear in mind.
You don't get a free pen. This has been a weird one.
This has taken us so long to do because, like, it's so confusing. There's so many bullshit letters. There's so many lying police officers who are like, oh, he was Welsh. Oh, I've been writing to myself. Like, it's just really... Look into it. But I basically think there's no such thing as the Zodiac Killer, which is exactly what the girl who is the next Zodiac Killer's victim would say, isn't it?
I think that... I even started to think that the Island murder, the chap that survived it, and the Cecilia girl, I'm starting to think that was a copycat.
Really?
Because it was the outfit and everything, and
the branding, because that's not been used
come
anywhere
from
else.
The papers. So if you were going to go out and stabbed 2 people, you'd go, do you know what? I'm going to do it as a Zodiac. Because...
I think that's what happened with them. There was one of them that I was like, this is definitely someone who said it's the Zodiac to cover their tracks. But yeah, the bloody shirt is the only thing that throws me off.
Yeah, that does throw me.
But I've got an advanced theory about that anyway, but that gets really far-fetched about someone at the newspaper finding it, being like near the crime scene, and then using that to sort of corroborate everything. But Robert Graysmith, or Robert Smith as he's actually known because he changed his name, which is very unusual for a crime writer because it usually undermines what they say, has made a career out of it. So yeah, do check out the Generation Y podcast because there's loads. It's great, it's brilliant, and that one on the Zodiac is especially fascinating. And there's a guy, I think it's called ZodiacKillerFacts.com. His website is, I mean, it's worrying, but it's encyclopedic. Thorough. It is thorough. Yeah. It's better than GCSE bite size anyway.
Yeah, he knows his stuff.
Who are we going to do next?
Ooh, we're doing a family next. The Bloody Benders. And it's a historical one. Because we've had quite a few people saying about the podcast that they really enjoy listening to it, but they freaked out by the modern ones. They can't cope with them.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we've had a couple of requests for historical ones because, you know, put a bit of distance between it. What's a dead prostitute with 100 years difference? You know.
Yeah, I think I find it a bit easier to deal with the historical ones. So yeah, we're going to do the Bloody Benders.
Yeah.
Just for the name alone.
The Bloody Benders.
So this has been the All Killer No Filler podcast. I'm sorry it's been a bit of a confusing one, but we don't really fucking know what's going on with this.
We if you're confused, think of how we've had to get this together to make it slightly less confusing than it was in the first place. Still don't know what's going on, but I don't think there's a Zodiac.
No,
I've completely changed my opinion.
Doesn't stop you wearing the badge though, does it,
no,
Rachel?
It doesn't.
Or
no,
the tunic.
No.
The whole time. Executioner's hood I've had to look up for the whole of this. So yeah, this has been episode 17. If you've enjoyed it, please do give us a nice rating on iTunes, and we shall see you soon. Thank you.